The Halo franchise has played a big part in my gaming life, and not so surprising it has with a lot of other gamers as well. Every game that has released is visually stunning for its time, and the franchise has even to this day still established itself as Microsoft's flagship title for their collection of exclusives. It's now been 16 years since the first Halo made its way onto the shelves, and as we can expect, a lot has changed and the lore for the Halo universe has become so expansive that there's actually books to fill in the gaps. In those 16 years, Halo has released 9 main games, which are not including the remastered versions and smaller budget projects. The next main Halo game, as far as I'm aware, is scheduled to release at the end of next year. With recent titles being revealed usually around a year before it actually releases, we should be expecting a new reveal for the game anytime soon. But as we wait for more news, I thought it would be worth looking back and wondering, has Halo been good enough to justify its 16-year stay, or did it bite off more than it could chew? Let me take you down the memory lane through the great journey that we call Halo. Halo Combat Evolved was where new standards would be set for the console shooters when it came out on November 15th, 2001. When it was first revealed in 1999, it was set to be a Mac OS real-time strategy game. That wasn't until 2000 when the idea was dropped and Microsoft went on to purchase Bungie Studios, the developers of the game, and issued them to turn the game into a first-person shooter. As a result, we ended up with a game that felt ahead of its time and just seemed to get every little detail of it right. From stepping out of the drop pod after you crash onto the Halo ring, all the way to that cutscene that introduces the Flood, and who can forget that pistol. The story was a nice way of introducing us to its world. Every campaign mission had a story to tell, and gave us further experiences like playing the game on harder difficulties and playing with friends on co-op split screen. These were elements that we now identify with Halo. The game was such a visceral experience from start to finish, and even after that amazing adventure we had, this is what Master Chief had to say at the end.
I think we're just getting started.
After the events of the first game, where you would fight on Installation 04, in Halo 2 we would be taking the fight on home soil, Earth. Well, only for 3 missions, but despite that little blunder in the marketing, the game took on a life of its own and is regarded by many fans as the best in the series. The campaign was much more expansive, with you switching between 2 characters, Master Chief and the Arbiter, each telling their different stories. The game also introduced a few new features like health regeneration and dual wielding. While the ending of the campaign wasn't really what we hoped for, it was nonetheless the multiplayer that made the game so memorable. It has been known that this is the game that kicked Xbox Live into action. The golden classic maps such as Lockout, Midship, Beaver Creek, Ascension, the list goes on. Not to mention the 1 to 50 ranking system which we got, which was so perfect for keeping players attached to the game even after the honeymoon period. With this generation of video games closing, the 2 Halo games were both in the top 3 best-selling games on the original Xbox. Halo 2 with 8 million sales and Combat Evolved with 6 million. Halo 3 was the grand finale of the Halo trilogy. The hype surrounding this game, leading up to its launch, was even bigger than Halo 2. Perhaps because of the fact that this is the first Halo game to be releasing on the 7th generation. Because of all the new technology and horsepower Bungie now had at their disposal, this time around they needed to increase their staff. In fact, they managed to get enough new employees to open up a new studio in Washington. With the first teasers shown off at E3 2006, and later that awesome live action trailer, the game finally arrived on September the 25th, 2007. The game was once again met with positive reviews, praising its perfect execution in gameplay, story and multiplayer. They introduced a new fan favourite mode called Forge, where you could build your own maps with friends and play them in custom games. Multiplayer brought us some very memorable maps like The Pit, Valhalla, Sand Trap, Standoff, Snowbound, etc. They brought the ranking system back and separated the multiplayer matchmaking in 2 segments, ranked and social, giving the players the option how they wanted to approach their game. You want to play competitively? Play ranked. Or if you wanted to just kick back and have some fun, play some social. Halo 3 to this day sold around 14 million copies, which makes it the third best-selling game on the Xbox 360. With the trilogy now finished, the community growing significantly with each passing release, I think the big question for fans was, what's next? In 2009, Bungie would go out of their way to release 2 games for the franchise in the same year. In February 2009, they released Halo Wars, which was the answer to some concerns Microsoft had regarding Halo's future. After the overwhelming success the original trilogy brought into the company, Microsoft believed that adapting the franchise to different genres like RPG, strategy, and survival would be an attempt to attract gamers outside of the FPS radar. And not to mention, Halo Wars being a real-time strategy game was almost where Halo started off in the first place if it wasn't for Microsoft's order of change, so it was quite nice to see the idea of what Halo might have looked like if the tables hadn't been turned. The story for Wars was interesting, telling stories of events that happened 20 years before the events of the main trilogy. While a good portion of Halo fans did give this one a pass, it was nonetheless a decent experience for the audience that it was targeting. Halo 3 ODST is a different story. Some fans see it as the beginning of the downfall, while some looked at it as the continuation of Bungie's ability to keep on delivering. The behind the scenes stories that Bungie had to tell while developing this game just seemed like pure chaos. After the hard work that Bungie had put into the original trilogy, they felt soon it would be time to move on, as they made a request to Microsoft to become an independent company. But as you can expect from a Microsoft's point of view, after a franchise that generates so much income and success, it's not quite the brightest idea to just let the team go that are making this happen. But nonetheless, Microsoft made an offer to Bungie. Make 2 more Halo games and you're free. Bungie accepted. So when ODST was first revealed in 2008, it was actually named Halo 3 Recon. The game was supposed to be this add-on story expansion for Halo 3 that was to last about 3 hours long. Bungie at this time were scattered as a unit with different teams working on separate projects. But soon after the reveal, Microsoft ordered the game to be extended and therefore be sold at full price $60. When the game did arrive, it received overall positive reviews across the board, however criticised for lacking in what a game should be at $60. A 6 to 8 hour campaign, a new mode called Firefight, and gameplay that was just Halo 3 with a few tweaks to its audio and gun models. Despite that, the game did avoid criticism over time when the prices started to go down, and therefore it would then be sold at a more acceptable price. I myself and all thought ODST was a decent game, with a unique story, but for the Halo community, it was the first time that they did not share the same ambition and excitement as one another when a new game launched. For the community, Halo Reach is the perfect example of Marmite. They either loved it or hated it. The peak of Halo's quality or the death of the Golden Age. This being Bungie's final Halo game, they stated that this was the Halo game they always wanted to make. From the campaign, to Firefight, to Forge, all the way to the multiplayer. The gameplay was a bit different, and for some fans it was too different. They brought back armor health, where you would be at times need to be on the lookout for a health pack to fully be repaired. But the new change that was the most controversial was the armor abilities. Armor abilities were added essentially for Bungie to add a 4th layer to combine with the gameplay that we all know from the old style, the weapon, melee and grenade. The armor abilities consisted of things like sprint, jetpack, armor lock, active camo, and also some unique ones for the elites like evade. Since previous Halo games had never really catered towards that style of mechanics and gameplay, that did piss off a good portion of the community. Halo at this time as well was not in the position it was before, with many other FPS like Call of Duty and Battlefield all competing for your money. So for Halo to slowly push a few boundaries that were more relevant to those games, it was met with mixed reception. However, many people like myself did welcome most of the changes that Reach introduced, and overall thought Bungie's final game was a pretty good experience. The single player was pretty strong, telling the story of the evacuation of Planet Reach and leading up to the events of the original trilogy's timeline. Firefight and Forge were good distractions. As for the multiplayer, I was underwhelmed slightly, because most of the maps in the matchmaking consisted of recycled areas from the campaign or community-built Forge maps. Despite some being good, they didn't offer a different impression from one another, and for it being Bungie's final game, I do wish they had pushed themselves that bit more with their creativity. So Reach released and Bungie now began setting off with their new chapter, as they would then sell the franchise to Microsoft. Right after that, 343 Industries would now be holding responsibility for creating future Halo games, a team formed because of their passion for the franchise. In their first year of office, they implemented some changes to Halo Reach's multiplayer and also released Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition, which marked 10 years since the release of the first Halo game. The campaign was fully remastered for current hardware of the gaming development, and even had a button on the Xbox controller which would allow you to switch between the old and new graphics just to see how far gaming technology has come in those 10 years. The only real missed opportunity was the multiplayer, which was included in this edition, but unfortunately it was Halo Reach's gameplay with different tweaks and classic maps rather than being the full Combat Evolved Anniversary gameplay. Whether this was because of a result of development time or not, it is a disappointment for the game to not get that fully remastered treatment. One of 343 Industries' goals when they started their new projects was for their games to have a slightly different identity compared to Bungie's Halos. And in their first main project, Halo 4, there are some clear examples. The storytelling in the campaign is one of them. Instead of the story being about the next Halo ring, the story now centers around Chief and Cortana, a more personal story this time around. We all know that Master Chief is one badass who shows no mercy, and while we acknowledge that he was a human being, we never really saw it in him. In Halo 4, he was given so much respect in his development of character throughout the campaign. Even that his face is covered with his helmet, you could still see and feel his emotions in the cutscenes. We were also introduced with new enemies called the Prometheans. Despite their questionable AI and lack of diversity in tactics between each enemy variants, they did have a lot of interesting lore to them in the hidden temples in the game, which unfortunately today many games tend to force you to leave the game and go on their apps and websites to discover more of the lore, which is just unfortunate. Or look at perhaps the sound design for the weapons that gave them a greater impact and satisfaction from all the weapons across the board. The graphics for the Xbox 360 were really pushed to their limits, with every single campaign mission having a unique presentation and setting, and the detail in the facial animations and cutscenes were spot on. But these improvements came at a very high cost. In the multiplayer, there was certain new additions added that 343 identified as their fresh take on Halo. Sprint was now default for every player, and armor abilities were kept and some were even added on. Custom loadouts that, while balanced and welcome, made the matches feel less competitive. The ordnance drops, which were essentially kill streaks from Call of Duty, once you got enough points you'd be able to spawn in an ordnance drop which was consisting of 3 choices, like a power weapon or power up. And that thing in itself just killed the motivation to even hunt for the power weapons that spawn on the map at the beginning of the games. Halo has always been about rushing to those power weapons to gain map control, and for Halo 4 to pretty much just ditch that, it was somewhat disingenuous. Now, the game when it first came out seemed to receive pretty positive reviews across the board, and even the community seemed pretty happy with it. It wasn't until around maybe 2-3 months after release when people started to realise that they saw themselves struggling to even bring themselves back to play the game. As a result, the months went by and Halo 4's population dropped at a significant pace. Even at one point, Halo 3, a game that released back in 2007, had more players online than Halo 4. Nonetheless though, this was 343 Industries' first main project, so for them to not quite nail it the first time could be expected, and with our feedback we were hoping for a more invasive Halo game next time around. If you follow any form of media coverage in the gaming industry, you're probably aware of what happened to the MCC. The inability for players to join servers, bugs, glitches, crashes, freezes, even on custom games and campaign missions, ranks being reset. I could go on and on and on, but I think the launch spoke for itself. The sad part for this game is that if it had launched well, it would have exposed anyone who hasn't played the games who had an Xbox One to get caught up on the story and universal gameplay and lore with Halo with just one purchase. But because of the busted launch, those potential new players were thrown away into the trash, and it would take 343 another 4 to 6 months before they get this game, I'm going to say, quote unquote, playable condition. The Halo 2 anniversary cutscene sure did look good though.
Not on your own.
Sir, permission to leave the station.
For what purpose, Master Chief?
To give the Covenant back their bomb.
Halo 5 Guardians is quite like the middle-class game for the franchise. The game seemed to have a lot going for it this time around, with its very successful marketing campaign, Hunt the Truth, where we were hyped up for this potential Spartan clash and revolution against each other. And 343 were claiming to build this game off of what people didn't so much like about Halo 4. They removed the loadouts and ordnance drops. The Spartan abilities this time around were the big change. Instead of picking a specific one at the beginning of a match, you would now have 7 abilities built into your Spartan to make the game feel more equally balanced. Some appreciated this change and some didn't, and when the game released I would say it was one of the weaker launches. The campaign was terrible and pointless, and all of that marketing that the game had going for it ended up being completely misleading. They removed co-op split screen, which for a Halo game is just treason. Game features like Forge and Big Team Battle didn't release until September, 2 months after the game had released. And let's not forget the progression system, where nothing was earnable by assignments or challenges or ranks. Everything in the game was through the Rec Pack microtransaction system, which obviously resulted in tons of players dropping real world money to spend on these packs for the new mode Warzone. It sounds like the game was a complete failure, but all in all I look back at it as a decent game, but it really did rustle a bit too many feathers. The arena mode for the most part was a lot of fun, where the Rec Pack system didn't come into play. The gameplay, while it didn't scream Halo, it was enjoyable for the most part. And in the end, Halo 5 ends up being once again a mixed bag for the community. The Halo franchise from 2001 to 2007 was one hell of a ride, but since then the community started to just get more and more split, and by today we have so many different groups who have different expectations as to what Halo should be. One group wants us to go back to the golden years, while others insist of bringing new innovation changes. But for the community, we still all share the same love and passion for the Halo franchise, and we all want Halo 6 to be good. Whenever Halo 6 gets revealed, I will go in with an open mind, and if the game does decide to bring in change, I hope for the most part there is some sort of classic mode to be included, to show respect and dignity to the veteran players and give them a place in the game too, because they identify Halo with 1, 2 and 3, so let there be a mode that shows tribute to a more global community. Thank you guys for watching the video. Be sure to leave your memories with the Halo franchise in the comments and tell me, what does Halo 6's gameplay need to be like in order for you to get the most enjoyment out of it? Leave a rating if you find it necessary and subscribe for more future content on the channel. Thank you once again guys, take care of yourselves, enjoy the rest of your day. See ya.